And can somebody say something? Because I don't think I've heard anybody say anything.
We can hear you.
Ah, okay.
I can hear you.
We're just waiting for all the technical operations or technical issues to be resolved.
I know. How many engineers do we need? How many PhDs do we need also? Yeah, I know. It's like, yeah. How many brains? I don't know. It's just hard. This stuff hard. All right. We got 18 folks in the call. I don't know if it started recording.
It did.
Yeah, I did. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Ashley. All right, so this is the first call for the year. There's a few things we need to go over, and then we, of course, have a really good demo. I'll do the CAB survey last, since we want to give Troy and the team as much time as possible to do their presentation. And then, of course, the PMC highlights and CFF and so on, right? So welcome. This is 2020 Cloud Foundry advisory meetings, and we're excited to have you. And if you're listening on YouTube, you can always join by just going to the Zoom meeting at the time provided, and then you can ask questions, and we have a Slack channel, #CAB. So you can join the discussion there. So we usually start with Cloud Foundry highlights. I think Swana is here, and I saw Chip also. So I think, I guess, Swana, you added those, so maybe you can update us. And then, of course, Chip, feel free to chime in as well. And welcome to 2020.
Hey, yeah, so I just wanted to quickly update on the Cloud Foundry Summits. Right before we broke out for the holidays, we had an announcement talking about just save the date kind of an announcement with Cloud Foundry Summits. This year, we are co-locating with our anchor event for Linux Foundation, which is the Open Source Summit. It used to be called LinuxCon in the past, so you may be familiar with one or the other name. It will be on the Thursday. So right after the Open Source Summit closes, we'll have the Thursday focused on Cloud Foundry Summit. We are working on the CFP, the number of tracks, the registration details, all of those kind of specifics. We will be announcing those quickly so that people can start planning for it. But at least for the dates, the North American one is on June 25th in Austin, Texas, and the European one is on October 29th in Dublin, Ireland. So at least you can save the dates. Hopefully in the next week or so, we will get the rest of the details announced as well. I also wanted to share one other thing for anyone here who has the bandwidth or who has the time and who's interested in in becoming a mentor. This is more like for students in remote locations in various geographies. They have submitted interest in Cloud Foundry as a project through the Linux Foundation's Community Bridge initiative. So I am talking to pretty much all the 35-ish people that submitted interest, and most of them want to start contributing to Cloud Foundry in some fashion. Some of them have mentioned these specific projects like the CLI or Irene, the Quarks kind of projects as the areas of interest that they would like to start contributing. So if you are interested, or if you know someone on your team that is interested in and is able to mentor folks that come in from that program, let me know. Just drop an email. I will start making the introductions. And as a last thing, we have a community calendar on our website. I added the link as well. It has the links and the meeting information for all of these meetings. Just a quick note on some of the upcoming meetings. We have the Bosch PMC meeting tomorrow at 11 a.m. US Pacific. And we have the SIG meeting, Cloud Foundry for Kubernetes SIG meeting next week, or next Tuesday. We have two meetings, the SIG meeting and the bi-weekly app runtime PMC meeting. And we also have the Cloud Foundry operators SIG meeting next Wednesday. So feel free to add the calendar to your own. And there are also channels for those SIG meetings in Cloud Foundry Slack. So feel free to join the channel and ask questions or look for the agenda and such. Any questions?
I was going to ask that. I saw that now the conference is one day, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that means, I guess, will we keep the same number of tracks, or is it clearly going to be much less?
We will probably reduce the number of tracks because it just doesn't make sense to have all 7 or 8 tracks that we used to have in the past across 2 days. And those are the kind of details that we're still trying to figure out. And today and tomorrow, we are gonna have those discussions and see how many rooms do we get, how many tracks can we host, what are the most meaningful tracks and such, and announce those as, I think, as late as next week, hopefully. But yeah, those are the details that we're still trying to figure out as to what tracks are relevant and how many tracks is it possible or reasonable to do in a one-day event.
Right. So you still, I guess the gist of it is that, typically those kind of one-day event would be just a single track, single room, but there's a possibility that you might have multiple. That's what you said.
Yes. We're definitely looking at more than one track. That is for sure, because we have just so many broad topics that it is not possible to have just a one track kind of an event. So we are looking at multiple tracks. It's just how many can we accomplish is something that we're discussing.
And then we'll have to start at like 4 in the morning.
Say that again?
We'll need to start at 4 in the morning and finish 10:30 at night.
Who needs sleep? Sleep is underrated. Let's go overnight.
Woo! Well, we can also look at shorter talks. Maybe the same content can be communicated.
Is that Nick?
Yes.
So Dr. Nick, you're going to shorten your talk to what, 30 seconds?
Oh. Right. Just jokes.
Welcome. I got a message from Ashley saying that most of Tuck and Wayne would be able to join. But I guess, when you're in Australia and there's fire all around you, you need to have some comfort with us. All right, welcome.
Right. I'm currently getting comfort from Utah. Surrounded by snow.
Okay, cool.
Excellent.
Of course, people know it's a joke. I mean, we all wish folks from Australia the best, and see if we can help. Anyway, another question I had for you, Swana, is obviously this is part of the Open Source Summit, and I'm not looking at the calendar for those events. Is this the day before, or is it in the middle as part of the conference itself?
It's the day after. So Open Source Summit ends on the 24th of June for North America and the 28th of October in Europe. It will be the day right after. So it's co-locating, but it will not conflict or overlap with the Open Source Summit schedule.
Cool. So that means that people can actually attend both conferences very well. Okay.
Exactly. And that's the whole reason we are trying to do it after, so that people can kind of come in either on Monday or Tuesday, even if they don't want to stay for the entire Open Source Summit, and can stay on until Thursday of that week to attend Cloud Foundry Summit.
Excellent. Cool.
Yeah, the other thing that I'll add to that,
yes,
Swarner can clarify if I say it incorrectly, but we're also programming the 2 cloud tracks for Open Source Summit. So, if you're planning to come to the Cloud Foundry part of the event, which will be focused on contributors and focused on the end users as the 2 primary audiences, there's also going to be a lot of content that's very relevant during the core Open Source Summit itself.
Excellent. That's good to know.
That is very true. I will add that here. I forgot to mention that.
Let's see if there are any questions, or, I guess, Chip, if you have any other additions.
No, that's it.
No? Cool.
So
Go for it.
Previous ones, we also did hands-on labs type stuff. Are we going to be doing that again this year? And any interest in that, or is it different?
Yeah, it's different because I think that the Cloud Foundry Summit itself will be largely designed around those that use it every day and build it, with less of a kind of an expo floor style. But we're still looking to see if it's possible to do something. And it's also a possibility that we'll have some type of CF-related hands-on labs as part of the Open Source Summit sponsor area. So not really sure exactly how to pull that off yet.
Okay. With respect to the hands-on lab style things, we're very interested in helping out with that. So please, keep us in the loop, or if we can help in any way, You know,
Awesome. That was Wayne, right?
You betcha.
All righty.
I already spoke to Ashley and Brian and one other person whose name I'm drawing blank on from Stark and Wayne right before we closed for the holidays. So yeah, I'm definitely going to pull any and all of you from the previous hands-on labs or anyone from the if we do go down that path.
Okay, last chance for questions for the foundation on those topics.
Not last chance. You can always ping us on Slack. And we'll also be on the call for the rest of the duration, so feel free.
Fair enough, fair enough. I just want to make sure I give Troy as much time as I can. Yeah. Okay, great. So we are going now to the highlights, and I have Eric here with me for runtime updates, and hopefully you can hear him. If you cannot hear him, say something so we can move him.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Max. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, pretty good.
Yeah, I'll comment briefly on some of the activity that's been going on in the Runtime PMC. So a lot of it actually has been focused on development around Kubernetes and getting the system to run there. So I know release integration in particular has been really focused on this problem of providing integration support to a lot of the component teams as they've been focusing their own efforts on getting K8s deployable artifacts for their components and adapting them to interact with Kubernetes. And so I think SI is planning on sending out a proposal for the first phase of that effort very soon. And along the lines of the component teams, CAPI's really been focused on that, both building out their Kubernetes deployment artifacts and making some initial progress through their milestones on integrating against KPAC to run cloud native build packs for staging tasks. And likewise, UAA, I believe, has a long track of work in their tracker now around building a K8s deployable artifact for UAA. And I previously mentioned that networking is also, they had, even a few months ago, released an initial version of their component that synchronizes CF route info to Istio and Kubernetes resources, and they're continuing to refine that. And I know also work on the Logregator team has picked up around both logs and metric integration on top of that K8 substrate. So there's a lot of parallel activity kicking off now on those teams, trying to get that all wrangled together into something somewhat more coherent.
Thank you, Eric.
I have a question, Eric,
Yeah.
This is Nick. You might have said it right at the top, but I apologize. The packaging of things towards Kubernetes, obviously, partly is the Docker part. Is everyone going to be using build packs and so we have, for example, cloud controllers written in Ruby. We don't have a Ruby build pack, but will everything be using build packs, or will some not?
Yeah, I think as they have the bandwidth, teams are very interested in using tools like cloud native build packs to build the Docker components or to provide mechanisms by which downstream vendors can build their own variants of those components. Maybe UAA is farther along in that because there is a Java build pack, but I'd have to check with the UAA team on that. They're just building Docker files to produce those components. I think CAPI might be having to do that for now for Cloud Control.
Cool. I might not be in everyone's channel or the team, but if they start shipping artifacts they want people to test, happy to try to test them as soon as they've got things to be tested.
Great, yeah. I know I've broadcasted elsewhere, but I've also been trying to maintain as comprehensive as possible an index of links into those efforts. So there's a Google Doc out there pointing to some of those specifics as well.
Thanks, mate.
And Elliot's on the line, so he could probably talk to their plans with the other languages.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Dr. Nick, I think you're absolutely right. Ruby is very much on our radar in terms of priorities. We know that a lot of the components would need the Ruby CNB in order to make use of the new cloud native build pack. So that is actively on our roadmap right now, looking to wrap up the .NET Core and PHP, and then Ruby is looking to come very close after that. So stay tuned, I guess.
Thanks, Mike.
Eric, can you give a quick outlook on how you intend to solve the upcoming issue around Blobstores? Because if we are on a Kube native world, I think everybody agrees that the existence of a Blobstore is probably not something that we would like, and would like to have everything on image registry. And I know that there is some work, there has been some work happening in Pivotal around KPAC, and I know that there has been some work in the Cloud Controller on adopting KPAC, but can you maybe quickly outline how that strategy is supposed to come together and in this context?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Cloud Controller is really the only client of that Blobstore. And to my knowledge, the integration with KPAC and then KPAC's further consolidation of resources on the OCI image registry solves a lot of that. I think there's still a few loose edges. Maybe resource matching is the main one that comes to mind. So I don't know the exact plans for removing that dependence, but that's probably something to talk to Zach and Scott about specifically. And Will Pragnall as one of the other engineering leaders on that side.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be great if we could get all the blob management into the interface of an OCI image registry, since that that dependency we're expecting always to be present, and then it'd be great if we could remove that other one.
But do I get this right that in consequence that means that one of the upcoming what did I learn today? CF for Pivotal Application Platform for Kubernetes distributions, or CFF distribution, whatever the name of that thing will be, right? The Kubernetes based one, will that then package like a KPAC as an additional component as part of the Cloud Foundry parts, or how is that envisioned?
Well, I believe that any distribution of CF that's incorporating KPAC would then have a distribution of it. That's my understanding of the current plans. Even to the extent that Cappy and Relent have been discussing how to get a more coherent artifact in the community that incorporates all of that work. I think they've been planning jointly to have KPAC incorporated there. And there may just be some discussion of like which side it falls on. Would it be bundled directly into the Cloud Controller deployment resources, or would it come as part of some integrated set of modules that would be more under, say, Relent control?
Okay.
Excellent. Any more questions for Eric? Okay, cool. So I pinged Morgan. He's been a bit sick, so he did send me the update for Bush, and it's pretty straightforward. It's been busy, I guess a slow week, sorry, which is expected. This is the second week since the holidays. But he mentioned that they've been working on exposing director metrics. Things like, for instance, number of unresponsive VMs, these that are free, resurrection status, number of processing tasks, number of queued tasks, etc. So I'd recommend you to join the Bosch PMC meeting, which is this Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, if you have more questions, or if you have questions, I guess, for Morgan. Okay, for extensions, it's definitely been, slow, and we have not had our first meeting, which will happen at the end of the month. So hopefully we'll get you some updates next year, next month. Sorry.
Don't rush it.
Yeah, no rush. I think the important thing also to mention for people, if you have not, gotten a status for extensions since a few months ago, is that we have 3 projects that moved to the attic. So those projects are moving to Cloud Foundry Attic, and it's mainly lack of interest or also, I guess, you know, experiments that maybe didn't pan out as much as what we expected. So with that, let me see if you have any questions for anything that happened so far. Otherwise, we'll ask Troy, and I guess it's Thulio from SUSE to start sharing. And then we'll move to the CubeCF presentation, which is sort of the main event for today.
Thanks. So thanks very much. And this is going to relate back to the stuff that Eric was talking about. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a background. Can I ask people to go to mute if you're not the speaker? I'm going to go to mute as well.
Okay. So I will share my slides if I could. And then I'll hand it over to Thulio at some point. I'm getting a message that I cannot start screen share while other participants are sharing. So.
Oh, am I sharing? Crap. Sorry, Troy. All right, go.
Does that look okay?
Yeah, we can see your screen. Thank you.
Okay, great. So this is a presentation about KubeCF and our team's intention to bring it upstream. It's a little bit of internal evangelism, so everyone knows what we're up to, what our intentions are, so that we don't duplicate effort. I was listening very attentively to what Eric was talking about with the upstream teams, Kubernetisifying, making the components not only Kubernetes native, but Kubernetes idiomatic. This will deal a little bit with that, but it's mostly to let everyone know how far we've come, what we're up to, give a little demo, and sort of let everyone know how important this is, not only to us, also to IBM, but to the community as a whole. So what is KubeCF? It's a GitHub repo and a number of public build pipelines, which you might not necessarily know about, but you will see the results of in the Git repo. It's currently at under the SUSE org, SUSE/KubeCF. And that grew out of our V3 branch of SUSE SCF, which some of you may recall is the basis of our cloud application platform distribution. Our intention is to get this upstream. We'll talk a little bit about how we do that later. But its function as a central point for bringing together components for a Kubernetes distribution is like CF deployment. So it brings together, but because it's sort of downstream from CF deployment, it actually relies on CF deployment at the moment. Thulio and Jeff or Vlad, please feel free to join in and correct me if I'm wrong here. We publish this as a set of container images that are created using Fissile and these public build pipelines as Helm charts. So Helm charts are the things that coordinate these and deploy them in much the same way as we did for SCF. There's some important differences though in the newer branch of code though. Most specifically that it relies on the work from Quarks. In fact, we sort of consider this right now as part of the Quarks project. Because KubeCF relies on CF operator in order to run properly on Kubernetes. In fact, it won't work without it. If you push the KubeCF Helm chart directly without a CF operator in place, it won't really do anything. And that's because CF operator is in charge of lifecycle management for KubeCF. It watches the namespace, and a CRD translates Bosch manifests into Kubernetes manifests in real time. KubeCF provides those manifests, and I can't even read my own slides here. And it manages some K8 specific stuff. So as I mentioned, it serves the same function as CF deployment, but it actually tracks CF deployment as an upstream source of truth. And this is done by a manual process. So we bump to specific CF deployment releases, and that involves doing some patches. And Thulio, are you online? Did you want to elaborate on this at all?
Yeah, so, well, since the CF deployment itself was not designed to run on Kubernetes, what we have to do is to tweak some things. And I'm going to show, when I do the demo, I'm going to show like a few ops files that we use to tweak that behavior and be more Kubernetes native.
Okay, some very important questions we need to decide on as a community. We of course have some preferences. Chip has expressed an opinion on this. Is where does this go when SUSE donates it upstream? Is it a Cloud Foundry incubator project, or should it be part of the Quarks umbrella? Chip's suggestion was that it should be a separate project under the Runtime PMC. We've had a number of discussions with release integration with SI about how this will work with CF deployment. And of course, something we have a little more control over is when that happens. We were very keen to get it in as soon as possible to raise the profile of CubeCF so that everyone who's working on porting CF components to Kubernetes know about it and know how it works. We want to get another release out to get things stabilized so that the developers aren't pulled off answering questions where we know that it's just, you know, you have to do this little thing to get everything working. So I communicated to a couple people at CFF that we're going to do it right away. We're probably going to hold off for at least one more release of CubeCF before we donate it. We want to get some docs better in order. Only the brave and intrepid have managed to find their way through. I know Dr. Nick has played with this with some success, but we want to make it easy for people before we release the hounds. When we make the decision about where this goes, we must be mindful of the fact that CubeCF is the crucial source for two downstream distributions, or our cloud application platforms from SUSE and IBM CFI. So we need to.
Sorry to jump in. I think there is one person that is not muted. Wahid. Thank you. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Troy.
I thought it was me. So we need to take care about how sensitive this is and be aware. So I'm going to mute now, and I will stop sharing so that Thulio can share.
Okay,
and he's going to give us the demo.
I hope you all can see my screen.
Hi, Ashley.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, cool. You know, the check that we all do every time. I'm going to start showing you guys a typical values.waml that we use to deploy CubeCF. This is not the actual one that Troy used to deploy on the cluster that I'm going to show, but it's very similar. And the requirements, the essential requirement is the system domain. That's what you have to define, right? Like Cloud Foundry cannot just guess the system domain. And this is going to go away in 0.2. It's here just to show how we do on 0.1. And we also have the features property, which enables us, allows us to enable features. So for example, in the cluster that I'm going to show you, you will see Irene is enabled and Ingress is enabled. We have other features that we can tweak.
Question, so can we,
sure,
when we're just doing dev testing of this thing, can we just put in 0.0.0/0 for those two ranges, or do they need to be accurate?
I'm using 0.0 here because at this point it's going to be relevant in 0.2. the reason it's there in the first place, it was a mistake that I did to actually create a security group to talk to ThreadHub on 0.1. We are removing this on 0.2. So at this point, I'm using 0.0 just to make it easy to run on any cluster. Okay. I'm actually going to delete this so we don't confuse anybody anymore. So this is a typical values like WAML. If you want to add many features, feel free to look up into the original values.waml, and you will see, you will find all the features that we currently have. Let me click here. What I'm going to show you now is the cluster itself. So these are all the pods. So you can see we have the CubeCF namespace with all the components that we are used to see with CF deployment, with a minor changes, like for example, we don't see the Diego cell, instead we see Irene because we activated it. And we see a few jobs out of their original instance groups, like the routing API and the scheduler. What we do have different is this other namespace that holds the apps for Irene. And I'm going to show you the commands now that I use to deploy. This is a similar cluster that Troy deployed. That's the one that I'm showing you guys. First, we create the namespace for CubeCF, and then we install the CF operator. We use Helm. It should work without passing any extra values, but you can. In some cases, it may be useful. And then we install CubeCF. Here I'm using 0.1, not tip-up master. And I'm using that values that I just showed you guys. And then we can interact with the cluster. So here I just deployed the 12 factor app. You can see some logs. You can see the app running, and we can access. For this other cluster here, we can even access it through the browser, of course. And we can even do another push here. Same experience that everybody is used with Foundry. I'm going to show you now a few pieces of code. So this is we have a bunch of ops files here, and like I mentioned before, they are used to either add functionality to CF deployment that is specific to Kubernetes. So for example, probes, health checks, ports that we need to open on Kubernetes. And we do this by adding the parts properties for the jobs. So for example, here we are doing a readiness probe on the port 2223 for the SSH proxy, and we are also opening the port 2222. And this parts properties is handled by CF operator to create services or to create the pods with the proper health checks. Another thing that we have to do, like I mentioned, like patches, we have pre-rendered scripts and a bunch of patches to tweak functionality from some jobs. In this case, I'm patching the routing API and changing, for example, the BPM WAML file in this case. And then we are able to make it run on Kubernetes. And this is it for my demo. Any questions?
Thanks, Thulio.
Okay. Welcome.
So what's next? As Thulio showed, all of the stuff that goes to make Kubernetes CF release comes right now from Bosch, with a couple of exceptions coming in. We designed it, of course, before any of the efforts of the upstream teams started to turn their components into Kubernetes native components. So Bosch was the lingua franca for what we've built here. That said, now that this Kubernetes movement has started happening upstream, we're going to also consume other types of artifacts to combine them into the release within CubeCF. So the first of those artifacts would be Helm charts. The Irene team expressed an opinion that they would rather deliver, rather than a Bosch release, deliver just a Helm chart with some reservations about Helm charts. Everyone who's working with Helm has a few reservations at least about them. And so CubeCF has the ability to consume other Bosch releases now. We are in the works. We're working on, for example, subbing out the database component instead of using the CF MySQL, instead of using the Bosch release of that, trying out some Helm charts for some highly available MySQL databases like MariaDB. We could add support to add Kubernetes YAML directly untemplated Kubernetes configuration and container images. And we've seen demos from Dimitri on YTT templated release artifacts. And we could also consume those and make those part of a CubeCF release, but we would need help from the teams that are making those components and making those choices of how they want to package their components. We would need help in the CubeCF team to get those integrated. But it's our intention to make this extensible, and it's our intention to eventually replace all of the Bosch releases with Kubernetes native components. It's very much built into the design of CubeCF that over time it can evolve. Rather than stopping work altogether on all Bosch stuff and rebuilding everything on Kubernetes, this CubeCF was designed to give us a path to gradually move. So we can still have releases even though maybe all the component teams haven't ported their stuff to Kubernetes fully yet, because we have things to automatically port that. So likewise, the Kubernetes, the CF operator. The CF operator right now is very complex, and we understand that it's very complex. It's very complex for a reason, because it has to translate Bosch into something that Kubernetes can understand. Ideally, it would not have to be so complex, and we can start removing more and more of that complexity as the individual components of CFAR start to be ported to Kubernetes. We would ask anyone who's working on Kube native components, or we've seen the proposal on Kube idiomatic guidelines. Anyone who's working on that stuff, we would love to have some interaction with them, between them and the CubeCF team, and consult us about how to integrate what they're doing into CubeCF. That's actually the primary goal of this whole presentation, is to internally evangelize this point of contact between CubeCF team, Quark's team, and the component teams. And about what we can do to help. Some of you know that a number of the SUSE team have been working, trying to get Cloud Foundry to run on Kubernetes for about 5 years, since before the 1.0 release of Kubernetes. We learned a lot of painful lessons over that time, and we would love to help people avoid those and learn from the experience. A lot of people first dealing with Kubernetes will assume that it will all make sense and everything will work beautifully because that's what the hype is about, but there are a lot of pitfalls that we would love to surface and allow the rest of Cloud Foundry development to avoid. So please don't repeat our mistakes.
Oh, sounds like a conference submission here.
I could definitely do that. I'm happy to evolve this. I've also promised Caitlin a blog post about this too. This presentation started with my post to CFDev, exhorting people to come and become familiar with CubeCF and what we're trying to do so that we can get a coordinated effort towards everyone running beautifully on Kubernetes. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Yeah.
Sorry, you've also got a bunch of interesting general purpose things that are in the CF operator that might benefit the rest of the world, like the secret generators and stuff like that.
Yeah. So again, that's a good point. We had to put those in, and the initial intention was we can make these useful for everyone. We could even try and submit them upstream to Kubernetes. But actually, even within SUSE, we're not completely unanimous that that's a good direction to go in. Maybe we should just focus on providing in the operator only what is absolutely necessary to run CFAR on Kubernetes. So yes, it's there and it's good stuff, and it should be, a lot of those things should be Kubernetes features. We'd love to get those either as independent operators or submitted upstream. But at the same time, we realize that CF operator is very complicated because it's providing extended functionality to Kubernetes, which ideally we wouldn't have to use. So that actually segues nicely into my first seed question here, which is why is it so complicated? Because there's a lot of stuff that Bosch does that Kubernetes doesn't actually do yet. So
yes, even in Kubernetes, certificates suck.
Yeah, exactly. And oh yeah, I wanted to call out the Kubernetes idiomatic component guidelines, and I forgot who authored that. The Arini team, somebody remind me. A pivot from the Arini team, and it's being shopped around, and we're contributing feedback to that. People are chiming in with how they feel about those guidelines. They are not very opinionated yet. And I think we may get a lot of teams departing in different directions and doing things in radically different ways, which is a good learning experience, but I'd argue that we don't have a lot of time to learn this stuff, and that stricter guidelines or tooling to enforce a certain amount of conformity would probably be helpful. Other questions?
Smoke tests. How do you run smoke tests? Or errands in general?
Thulio, can you answer that?
Oh, yes. So let's see if I can I share the screen? Maybe it's easier to show you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we have it actually automated here with Bazel, so it's easier to trigger from CI. But basically, we are doing a kubectl edit on the. Actually, maybe I can. So it's something like this. What we do is that we edit the smoke test Quark's job. So it's not activated in this cluster.
Yeah, sorry.
But we do have a Quarks job that.
Can you just type that command out again?
Sorry, say again?
That you had that edit command and then you delete it. I was just about to take a screenshot for my own. Yeah, there it is. All right.
No, it's not that one. This one. Yeah, sorry. I usually trigger with Bazel.
Yep.
And what happens is that.
Could you explain maybe just how to get that Quarks job through the values jumble?
I'm sorry, I have a difficult time to understand this question.
I say if you could try to explain how to get the Quarks job for the smoke test through the values.
Oh yes, yes. So in the values memo, we have this testing, and we do have the smoke test by default true for production, but we do not have this the cats and even brain tests. So you can come and pass testing in whatever you want to deploy. What Separator will do?
Brain test
is a SUSE. It's a SUSE acceptance test.
Yeah.
And what will happen is that an errand becomes a Quark job. So CF operator detects the lifecycle being an errand. It creates a Quark job, but the Quarks job is not triggered automatically. And this is why we have to run this patch on the job. And we are basically saying strategy now. And what it does is that the controller for the Quarks job creates a job that actually runs in the cluster the tests. And that's
so we could make I mean, I know you've got your Bazel thing, but we could make a little kubectl plugin to sort of map these sort of ideas to sort of, you know, down.
Oh yeah,
I know you're happy with your Bazel things, but that's obviously, you know, no doubt pain and suffering, and you wrote them. For everyone else, I guess kubectl plugins might be another.
Yeah, it helps us on the CI part, and for development it's quicker, but not for production. We definitely need to add these commands to the documentation and say, like, this is how you run stuff.
And you can just edit the file and change it in your text editor and save it.
You can.
With
absolutely.
kubectl edit, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You can. It will be kubectl. Something like that, right? I don't have it here, so it will fail. And then you manually trigger it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Exactly. Thank you, Thulio.
Okay.
I don't see anything on the chat. Obviously, lots of information and contact points. And I guess you guys are part of the K8S SIG also, right? So you can.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the discussion came up about how we're going to keep our efforts in line with the efforts of the component teams. I just wanted to, I missed a slide on my way earlier. Just a bit of a timeline. 1.0.0 of CF Operator was December 20th. We've had another release since. CubeCF, we're going to have a 0.2.0 very soon. Lots of great feedback from the community, notably from Dr. Nick. A lot of those fixes are going in. And we hope to have a CubeCF 1.0.0 March 2020. And that will be the point at which we move it upstream, but possibly sooner. We can talk a little bit about that offline, but what good timing for that is, if it's good to announce that at SUSECon or some other thing. But yeah, we just want to get some more documentation in place so that people don't get confused when they come to the repo, and they know what to do, know how to run the acceptance tests and all those things. These are the links. I guess I could put a link to this presentation in the agenda so people can know where to find it. Any further questions?
That's good. Thanks, Tony and Julia.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I second that. Thank you very much. Follow up on Slack with them. We have one more final presentation for this call. So let me share my screen and then we'll get to it. So I think you have to now allow me to do it, but if you haven't. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Okay. So in the past 3 years, I've done this survey and I've been running these meetings and I'm happy to do it, but obviously at some point, maybe it makes sense to change. And that's one of the big difference with this survey versus previous surveys. But let's go through the results and then we can hopefully have like a couple minutes to discuss. So I have 7 minutes on my clock. So I sent this out. Hopefully you guys took it. We had about 34 response, but the goal is to do kind of an informal retro and collect feedback. And the responses are anonymous, but some people actually volunteer their names, like Sorna. But you know, the point is to try to find out information, right, from the community and see what works and what doesn't work, and let's see if we can adjust. We do it once a year, so it's not too much to ask, I hope. So the first question was, have you attended the CAB call in 2019, just to get a feel for how many people are attending and how much are they attending? What did you enjoy the most? And this is a new question. Does it need new leadership, the CAB, you know, the community calls? And then constructive feedback. I keep it short because I want people to actually take the survey, because as you know, you've taken surveys, when they have a lot of questions, you just stop halfway. So these are the results. We had only 41% completion rate, but this is the highest we've ever had. So this is pretty good. 34 responses, and it took about 20 seconds on average for people to respond. So if you didn't take it thinking it would take you a lot of time, just know it's very quick next time. So these are the responses for the first question. You can see that we only have a few regular participants and and the majority are attending every now and then. I guess it makes sense because people look at their schedule and look at what's going to be presented, and if it's not of interest, then they don't attend. Like today was clearly a good attendance because a lot of people want to hear about CubeCF, so that was good. So these are the results, and I think maybe we had every questions I allow people to put some text, and you can see that some people say they read the call notes, and that's the one comment that came. So question 2, what did you enjoy the most? And what I did is I looked at the responses and I tabulated the words and did a count, and then a tag cloud, which I'll show you. So people definitely love demos, and you can see, right, like the presentation today with the demo that Thulio did with Troy, it really helps, you know, kind of make it interesting for folks. And so clearly keeping presentations that include demos is key. Obviously, people want to know about the projects and about the community, what's going on, and the presentations. I only listed the top 5 of the words out of the responses, and people love the updates. So this is the tag cloud, and you can see that basically demos is key, and hearing presentation projects. So it actually, you know, really represents what people enjoy the most. So these are some highlights from the responses. Somebody says always cool. I don't know if it's Swana, but I'm guessing it's her. She's been very positive. I love that, but you know, we want to also hear the negative part, or at least the things that we can improve. But it seems like these are kind of the highlights. I just looked at the responses and picked the highlights. Towards the end of these slides, I pasted all the responses or the data, so you can take a look at that. All right, so question 4, and this is important to me because I'm the one that's asking it, and I'll discuss it towards the end, but let's look at the results. So people say, you know, about 20% said yes, and then the rest said no, because I made this a 2, you know, yes, no question. And these are some of the highlights, because this question only had yes or no, and then a way to provide feedback. So people say unsure. Somebody said new blood. I love that. It's not me. I didn't take the survey. And there are a couple of people saying really good things about me. I appreciate that, but I think, you know, this call works because of you attending and people presenting. So how do we move forward? And that's, I think that's one of the reasons I asked that question, but let's discuss it towards the end. So that's the response here.
We love you, Dr. Max.
I know. I love you too, and I love the love. But at some point, we'll have to figure out. Maybe it makes sense to start looking at a you know. Let's talk about that at the end.
Even if you're not doing the cab calls anymore, I'll still tackle you with a hug every time I see you.
I'll still attend also, right? Okay, so let's look at the constructive feedback. Thank you, Wayne. So this is, you know, what constructive feedback you have, and it seemed that people said no, none. So basically, they love what's going on, and of course, presentation was an item that came up, and I'll show you some of the text. More, I think, presentation and teams and good. So these were the words that featured the most out of the responses. And I kind of like summarize it as none, more teams, presentation, good, right? So that's kind of how it worked out the data. And this is kind of the tag cloud. And you can see that people are not asking for any changes. They want more presentations and probably teams updates as well. So that was the cloud, the tag cloud. So these are the highlights from the responses. Keep up the good work, none. Perhaps support Abby or Chip. Could give a cab reinvigorated interest. Maybe they could guess present. So here's one thing, you know, feedback for Chip. I'll ping them and see if they see if it makes sense for the next one. They could come and present. But Chip is always there, and Abby does an AMA. So then, you know, I'm not so sure how to take this one, but that was one of the feedback. This one was also interesting, like maybe ask individual component teams to also present their roadmaps in more detail. I think that's actually excellent feedback in the sense that, you know, getting a, you know, PM present their roadmap instead of just saying, hey, here's the roadmap, go read it, or attend a bunch of calls to get the roadmap. This call might be a good place to actually present the roadmap. So I thought that was really nice. And then one person said there was a negative, what is CF good for tone in the cabs that I attended. I definitely would not want this to be the case. If that was the case, then we'll definitely try to figure out how to fix that. But that's a feedback, and I thought that was good feedback in the sense that
I could definitely see that tone perhaps bleeding through as everybody questions the future of where we're going with things, especially in light of Kubernetes adoption and all this other stuff. So, you know, try to figure out the differentiation. I suspect some of that tone might have come from those style discussions and one ponderings, right?
Yeah, it's good feedback. It's a good point, Wayne. I think, you know, 2019 was probably the pivotal, you know, no pun intended, year for Cloud Foundry in the sense of figuring out that Kubernetes strategy. And you can see with CubeCF and Irini and all the other projects, we're sort of getting there, right? So hopefully that tone will sort of disappear and Cloud Foundry will be what it is in the middle of the rest of Cloud Native, including Kubernetes. So that's the results. These are the answers, complete answers. So if you want to read them, I pasted the link in the CAB channel and then also in the agenda, and then I'll paste it again other places if you want. But I think, let me open it for questions. We're out of time, but I think one of the things that I want to try to do is to see if people would want to volunteer to either replace me or lead it with me until the point where they can take it over. I mean, I've been doing this for 3 years. That will be the 4th year, and I'm not tired of it. I'm happy to meet with Wayne and Dr. Nick and everybody else, right? But at some point, it makes sense to give other people an opportunity, and there's probably like new ideas, right, that could come in. And I'm involved in other things now, mostly, Knative and so on. So, I don't have a lot of information. I don't have a lot to add. All I'm doing is pretty much, organizing and providing some input here and there.
I think this was mentioned in the November call, or whenever our last call was before we went out for the holidays, that it might be worth at least getting some volunteers to host these individual meetings while you still, at least for the time, for the time frame, for the time being, even if you want to continue hosting, like leading these calls, Dr. Max, if someone wants to just step up and be the host for just that particular call, that during that occurrence, I think that would be a great way to at least get started, get to see what it takes to put the call together, put the agenda together, reach out to the folks and get the updates, and also be that host or the MC of the call for that occurrence. I think that would be a great way for them to step up and get the experience, at the same time get a little taste of what it takes, and also get their brand also established in our community, if that is something that they would like to do.
Cool. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Juana. So if you want to volunteer somebody, or better, if you want to volunteer yourself, then ping me or ping Swana, and then we'll see if we can tag you in the next one or the one after the next one. So with that, we are 6 minutes over time. Well, officially 3 minutes, since we started 3 minutes after 8. And thank you for joining. Thank you, Troy and Thalia, for presenting, and everybody else. And we'll see you in February. Take care, everybody. Bye.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.